So thinking about John F. Kennedy's inaugural address. So let's think about this. So in context, it was delivered at a key moment in American history. This was about a decade after the Cold War began, which we talked a little bit about with Faulkner. And Americans are really still grappling with this fear of nuclear war. I mean, they were scared that nuclear war was going to happen at all times, all right? And between, obviously, the United States and the Soviet Union. And this speech, like the election of this man who delivered it, really sought to change the nation's path by trying to replace fear with hope. Sound familiar? Speaking confidently, he signaled his intention to confront national and global problems and to make the nation's core values a foundation for action. So the result is a practical and optimistic speech that relies heavily on the idea that America's citizens have responsibilities to the global community, to their nation, and themselves and each other. So you see how it kind of goes big and then comes in to be more specific. So he delivered this speech in a style that was very compelling and very accessible. And you can see the film of the speech, not here, it's in, it'll be next, right below this. You can watch him give this speech. It is very inspiring. And so here it is too. I'm not going to play this here. I want you to watch the one below. So Kennedy views America as having key responsibilities to the bigger world, to the global world. And to carry out these responsibilities, he argues that Americans have to recall their core values, a commitment to freedom. And he insists that America must remain committed to what he regards as God-given human rights. Chief among these is the right to freedom and liberty for all, and he declares America's position as a leader and example for other nations across the world. He also talks about the responsibility of working with friends. He recalls the industriousness of American values, and he states that with hard work and cooperation, the country and its allies can meet any challenge. So also a commitment to aid to those in need. He turns to those newly free nations of the world and those that are impoverished, and he pledges America's support and generosity, citing that it is their moral duty, it is the country's moral duty of the rich and the free to help the poor and the oppressed. He also talks about the strength in the face of adversity. He recognizes the dangers of the modern world, and he asserts that the United States is a strong and courageous nation. And although we are sympathetic and empathetic and want to help, we're also going to protect ourselves and our interests and our allies from hostility and from aggression. But he also talks about the importance of finding common ground, and he focuses on the need for America to be sensible, even-handed, and sincere in the quest for peace. This section of the speech demonstrates his respect for being pragmatic, for facing these problems rationally and realistically, not flying off the handle and saying just anything, but really being able to make very practical decisions and back them up. So he talks about unity over division. So in the 4 paragraphs that begin with the phrases, let both sides, he strikes a very delicate balance. He expresses his hope that the United States and its adversaries will find a common ground, but he also argues that for America, cooperation and capitulation are not synonymous. To Kennedy, America's willingness to work with its enemies to solve shared problems and to address common concerns is not a sign of weakness. All right, it's not a sign for weakness. So we're looking at this question right here, and it's just checking. It says, why isn't Kennedy's call for the United States to find common ground and cooperation with its enemies a sign of weakness? Think about your own answer to that question. But he also knows that of all these, that he knows that cooperation is in his nation's best interest. Right? He recognizes that maintaining a strong military is not the only way to protect the American people. He understands that finding common ground with America's enemy also reduces hostility and the threat of violence against American citizens. Kennedy would not ask both sides to seek common ground if he thought that none existed at all or that these nations would not participate. So then he talks to the individual Americans. In this second part of the speech, he brings his focus home to the American people. Having established the course over which he intends to steer the whole nation, now he addresses the actions he would like to see individual Americans take. Okay, he talks about the problems that they face: tyranny, poverty, disease, and war. And what can we do to overcome them? Energy for action, faith in a better future, and devotion to society's betterment. All right. So perhaps the most famous line in Kennedy's speech, and you've probably heard this before, when he says to his fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. So what do you think that line means? Well, it calls for Americans to be willing to give of themselves, to sacrifice, and to work for the betterment of society as a whole. It is a call to responsibility and accountability. So by calling on his fellow citizens to use those tools rooted in the nation's long-held core values and beliefs to overcome the problems of the modern world, and by demanding sacrifice, responsibility, and accountability from all Americans, he is implying that his beliefs and hopes regarding American culture, heritage, and identity, he's saying what his beliefs are. He knows what he feels like America really is. All right, and so if you look at the inaugural address, he suggests that Americans are bonded to both one another and to the country's previous generations by their shared core values and beliefs. For Kennedy, these values and beliefs have shaped the America's cultural heritage and provided Americans with their cultural identity. So it's therefore the responsibility of every American to act in ways that are in line with those core values and beliefs.